January 6, 2025, not January 20, 2025. This is the date where Congress is capable of lawfully putting forward any evidence that they have of executive action. 13848. How? By invoking the Electoral Count Reform and Presidential Transition Improvement Act of 2022, further clarification of the 1887 Act. Under the Electoral Count Reform and Presidential Transition Improvement Act of 2022 and the one prior to that, there are two methods in which a member can object to accepting a state's electors. The one we're going to focus on is when electors were not regularly given. And this second method can count for insurrection and also for foreign interference. So it includes an elector voting for an illegitimate candidate. So a Congress member can say, hey, we have evidence that this candidate committed an insurrection, therefore it's illegitimate, or this candidate won through foreign interference and we have evidence. If and only if there is substantial evidence that there is foreign interference under Executive Order 13848, on January 6th, as they are going through the states where there is evidence of interference, one Democrat, House of Representative, and one senator must both object in writing and also sign this objection. Once the objection is raised and 87 members of the House and 20 members of the Senate accept the objection, the joint section, which is the January 6th certification, pauses. Both houses go into different rooms and they basically have up to 2 hours to debate and vote on whether the objection stands. For the objection to stand, 218 members of the House must agree and 51 members of the Senate must agree. In an example, hypothetically, say there was interference in Georgia, so both a representative and senator must come forward when that state is called on and object to the electoral votes. You must first achieve what's required in order to even be capable of invoking the Electoral Count Reform Act. Then once that's achieved, then it splits and everyone talks about the evidence, etc. And then it has to reach this threshold in order for the objection to pass. So this is how the numbers are looking so far. Trump has 312 electors and Harris has 226 electors, which means that Trump has to lose at the minimum 43 electors in order for him to not have 270, because whoever has 270 becomes the president, which means that the evidence that the Democrats have under Executive Order 13848 has to be so significant that it removes 43 at the bare minimum electors from Donald Trump. Upon successfully rejecting 43 electors from Donald Trump, assuming that Democrats maintain its unity or an objection to pass, the House must agree, achieving a threshold of 218. Assuming that the Democrats maintain its unity, this means that it requires to defect 7 Republicans. So 7 Republicans is what would get a successful objection of a state if there is sufficient evidence of foreign interference and if the Republicans refuse to promote political party over country. And then obviously the Senate has to agree as well, but Democrats have 51, so if unity continues, then that's all that's required. However, if Republicans sit out, then the numbers shift with the amount of people who are actually there. To invoke ECRA, it requires 20% agreement, and in order for the objection to pass, it has to be a 3/3 majority. Now, let's say it's successful. We managed to convince some Republicans to actually have some weight on the evidence of foreign interference or insurrection. However, since the DOJ dropped the election interference case, I highly doubt that it's going to have to do with Section 3 Amendment 14. However, let's say that it's successful. What's next? Now, the rejected electors do not go to Harris, which means that there won't be an achievement of 270. What does this mean? There's going to have to be a contingent election, which is what happens if no candidate gets a majority in the Electoral College. In this reality, the House of Representatives would choose the president and the Senate would choose the vice president. However, for the House to choose the president, it has to be each representative delegation having one vote, which means that California would have one vote, Texas would have one vote, New Hampshire would have one vote, Michigan would have one vote, and 26 states have to agree with the same president in order for that president to become the next president. So each House of Representatives state legislature is one delegation and they each have one vote. So the one who gets the majority votes within that delegation gets the vote. And whoever wins that becomes the president. If no one wins, then it gets much more complex because we're going to have to go through Amendment 12. Ultimately, we don't really have clarification on it, so it's probably going to require Congress to rectify that. In the meantime, whatever vice president is chosen by the Senate will be president until it's solved. However, imagine this, a reality where Democrats have proven beyond reasonable doubt that there was foreign interference within certain swing states or certain states, and there's Congress members who still vote to put Donald Trump in the Oval Office. What does this mean, and can they be prosecuted under Amendment 14, Section 3 for doing so, if there is sufficient evidence of foreign interference? However, know that the most important thing to understand is that there has to be sufficient evidence of foreign interference or whatever is happening that will change the outcome of certain state electors. Say they find foreign interference in Georgia, in Michigan, and Pennsylvania, that's it already. Trump will not win the presidency. And all that's required are these thresholds. Primarily convincing, at the bare minimum, 7 Republicans to unite with the Democrats, to unite with America, to unite with our constitutional supremacy. But remember, Donald Trump has to lose at the bare minimum 43 electors in order for him to not win the presidency. And this will only occur by Democrats invoking the Electoral Count Reform and Presidential Transition Improvement Act of 2022 during the January 6th certification process, by putting forward the evidence that they probably found under Executive Order 13848. If there is nothing put forth on January 6th, then it means that Democrats have failed us, and I need us to understand this. On January 6th, we should be expecting for Democrats to challenge the electoral certification. Note the difference between January 6, 2021 and this January 6 is that the people, we the people, will not be over there causing an insurrection, because it is the duty of the politicians to uphold that evidence in order to change that. It is not up for us to pressure, and that's the problem, that it wasn't extended because there was actual evidence, but it was extended because there was an insurrection. That was the fault of Donald Trump for not actually using his resources in order to quell the insurrection. Now, he could have challenged it through Congress itself, but he wanted the people to pressure Congress, right? And in this reality with us on January 6th, we don't require to go to Washington, D.C. because it should be our Democratic politician leaders who will be challenging the results. And that's the lawful way in which we should be challenging the results, not by going and forcing through violence. See, that is why January 6th was an insurrection, because there was a constitutional process happening, and it should have been Congress who would have flagged anything that was happening, but it was the people. It was the people meant to unlawfully extend that certification. Right? But the difference is that on January 6th, they will have up until January 20 in order to figure everything out. We'll see if it goes down like this.